Hey, welcome back to another Just 5 Minutes. Yet another one. My goodness, when will these things stop? Okay, so Docker. Well, that's not exactly new, is it? And I think everybody on the planet has probably heard of Docker. Yes, I've been rediscovering or discovering Docker dev containers, which I've really been enjoying, for the ability to move from a Linux machine to a Windows machine and have the same environment, which is what the containers are all about anyway. But certainly with the dev containers, I love that the fact that the core setup is already there. But this isn't really about dev containers. We've touched on it a little bit in a previous couple of Just 5 Minutes, but this is, albeit in fairly early beta really, is Docker WASM, which is not a euphemism for anything, but is basically the WebAssembly. So if you've listened to the other Just 5 Minutes, or probably indeed you may know this already, is things like Blazor. Blazor is the Microsoft thing, where it's essentially running in .NET code, essentially in the browser using WebAssembly. And of course, there's lots of other WebAssembly. It's not just limited to .NET, of course. Everything from Rust to C++ to everything else, really, that can take advantage of WebAssembly. But this is Docker Docker WASM, WebAssembly, whatever the name is going to be. And at first it's like, well, hang on a minute, what? Because obviously WebAssembly running in the browser, what does that mean? But obviously it doesn't have to. And the WebAssembly isn't just limited to those sort of scenarios, really. So, when you look into this a little bit, it is early. It's early days. I think they've got a technical preview. I don't think it's even necessarily an official beta, but ironically, fairly functional. So if you know anything about Docker with images and containers and all the rest of it, WebAssembly, again, just a quick recap, it's the portable compilation target, leverages it's JavaScript, C++, Rust compatibility and all that sort of thing. There's basically some WASM use modules, some modules that you can actually pull together. And that's what I think the Docker guys have done. But one of the main things that, a couple of main things that jump out is the fact that you've got Docker. At the moment, I've had a few issues, to be honest, here and there, especially when there's been upgrades to Docker Desktop. Things stop working. You've got to troubleshoot, sometimes uninstall, reinstall. And same on Linux as well. I've had my fair share of trying to, mostly to do with all the different package managers and options and permissions and goodness knows what there. But still, it works. And even with Windows using WSL2, where you've got the Windows Linux subsystem, the images and the container, the fact that the Docker engine has improved performance over the years, but with Docker WASM WebAssembly, it's going to run even quicker because it's even more lightweight. And you then think, well, do you even need Docker? But I think the idea is that, you still can rely on Docker being there. I'm sure it'll evolve like everything. But the other thing that really jumps out, apart from the performance, which obviously will be pretty impressive from what we're seeing and what I'm reading, but imagine a future where Docker runs Linux containers, Windows containers, and WASM containers all side by side. So the idea is, at the moment, of course, you can switch, like on a Windows environment, you can switch from Linux to Windows, but it has to switch the whole engine and everything else. And of course, well, you wouldn't be able to do that on a Linux machine anyway, for the Windows side. But that's a pretty incredible thing, really, because then you're really breaking down those boundaries even more. So that's looking really interesting. There's quite a lot of commentary because it's a new obviously quite a lot of hype around this, but I think it's quite interesting if you're actually using Docker Desktop and things like that at the moment. Obviously, if you're not, then that's okay as well. But that's what I've got for this time. It's worth checking out. I'll try to pop a link in the show notes below.